jump from one, drive over in the middle of my mind and everything else. It's challenging. I saw like the presentation stuff through it. I'm like, look at that, already good. Some people have different philosophies. It's like, yeah, it's all the kids drop on alcohol, right?
I really appreciate that. So you got me,
Yes.
whether
I would like to set up like an appointment in the next district and do some face to face.
let's do that in the next
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks a lot. I really I try to make it somewhat fun. Go ahead and don't try to
No, this is a different camera angle. This is perfect. It's not different camera angles. This is streaming to 3 different accounts. It's gonna be one single video. So whatever this one or that one or that one, they're not gonna want to go to 3 different accounts to watch 3 different angles. They all need to include the exact same thing. And if they can hear a voice. things that we can talk to you about, like that means that, don't worry, I heard you, if you're nothing for 10 minutes. Nobody's going to live stream. Because it's safe. No, the reason why we're going to live stream right now they're
First professional development with our new district leads is kind of a down payment. It's a deposit to suggest to you, to show you that we really are trying to respond to your specific needs, the things that you've shared with us over the years, your inability to do the things that you need to do by giving you time to think a little bit bigger. Okay, and so I encourage you to embrace the time today to take that opportunity. And I want to share with you that I was appropriately shamed recently by one of my colleagues, Ms. Jen Gaisher, because in an ADCO meeting, what she encouraged us to do was to take it easy on checking on the emails on a regular basis. So I want to let you know that I will, on occasion, throughout today's professional development, I will be checking my emails. Just to let you know. But I think it is a good reminder that we can easily get sucked up into the immediacy of the moment. And so to the extent we can, set that aside and let's spend some time doing what we need to do today. So I'm gonna just, one more thing to say is I wanted you all to know, I hope you recognize just the outstanding work Marty and Victor have done since they have been named district leads. How they have taken this and really invested time to make it something that is meaningful for you all. And so I just want to take the opportunity to say thank you, Marty. Thank you, Victor. Thank you, everybody. And I'm so excited to have such big names join us to kick off our professional development. So with that, Victor, I'll let you do some introductions.
I have to lower this thing quite a bit. I didn't see me behind the podium. But yes, thank you all for being here. It's great to see all your smiling faces this morning. I'm appreciative to hear the different conversations that were taking place and to see the support of our administrators. So thank you, Mark, also for being my co-pilot as well. So I want to just take a moment to share with you some information about Dr. Vincent, our first guest speaker. Currently, she is the executive director for CAS, counselors, and she's responsible for CAS operations and has devoted her life work to advancing the school counseling profession. She works closely with state leaders, legislators, and journalists, clarifying complex educational issues and champions policies and practices to support school counselors in California. For over 20 years, Dr. Whitson was director of student support services in the Monroe and Principal District, where she oversaw the school counseling program as well as several district-level operations. Between 2015 to 2017, Dr. Whitson served as an assistant professor and chair at the Educational Counseling Department for the University of Laverne and was a visiting professor for 10 years at Cal State New York. So I want to also just kind of let you know that I myself am excited to introduce my biggest mentor so far in school counseling, someone that I really look up to for advice. She's a true fighter for all of us in the profession, directions that our profession needs to take, and that is local, regionally, and nationally. She fights for us. And most of all, I just want to call her my friend. She's really good fighter for lots of us. So without further ado, please welcome Dr. Wilson.
Victor, when I first took over the position of chair, I went into from public education for 25 years as an administrator sure, you know, we have good instructors there bringing in our new generation of school counselors. And Victor was one of the first people that I reached out to help teach for us at the University of Laverne. So, because you know, some of you, you've probably seen me, I've seen you along the way in some of our functions, and Victor has always been on that road. So, and he's my mentor too, so, you know, yeah. So, and I'm really honored to be here. Can you hear me okay? I just want to make sure that so I'm really honored to be here, and I'm touched, you know, by actually the model that you put together in regards to having the rank and file folks, the school counselors helping lead themselves in their professional development. What a great idea, Mike. That was just wonderful. I don't know if it came from you, but I wish I would have thought about that when I was the director of student services at the time. So, because I think that really helps you all go in the direction together, you know, and decide what you need. So my presentation today is really kind of to answer that question about silos and to talk a little bit about where we've come and kind of give a bigger perspective in regards to some of the work that we've done behind the scenes to really advance school counseling in California in particular, and where we may be going in the future. So I started off too early 90s working as school counselor, was also realizing that we were pretty disenfranchised, you know, along the way. And
The interruption. Will all cross-country members please report to the locker room? All cross-country members to the locker room.
I've been out of public education for 4 years, and I missed the announcements too. You know, it's like, you know, the things that happen as you transition in your career. So, so in the 90s, there was 4 of us, I would say, that began to look at our significance in California school counselors. There was something called the Huntington Beach model. Has any of you heard about the Huntington Beach model? What that was, and that happened in the 80s after Prop 13 was passed, school districts were trying to figure out how to manage their budgets. The Huntington Beach superintendent decided that it would be best to use non-trained individuals in the classroom in place of school counselors. And it was a really dark time for all of us, and there was not any lobbying effort being done. And I happened to be, became the president of the association, and during that time started looking at some infrastructure things. So we would go up to Sacramento. It would be Trish Hatch, Paul Myers, Lonnie Brown, and myself. We'd go up and we would talk to legislators, and we just would divide the, you know, Sacramento capital, and we would begin to go out there. And most of the time the question would be, well, what are school counselors? We've never heard about them. Do they have a degree? And so, you know, so we began to educate. And along the way, we have become very significant in the structures of school counselors. But it took, you know, we're talking 30 years of work to try to undo some absenteeism that we had as a profession in regards to advocating for school counselors. So, so it took that much time to really start convincing others we were significant, even though I knew as a school counselor, you all know we are. But we're not really good about telling our story and about all the work that we do, right? We say we're seeing kids and we make it seem so easy, and it's not. There's so much that goes on. So, I'm getting used to this a little. So, our significance, I want to go through just some of our numbers, just to show what's happened in our state over the course of the last 2 years. And I'm going to move this a little bit so I can see. So just to show you, we have 104,000+ counselors in the nation working in our schools. 10% of those work in California. 10%. So we're very significant. We work with our national organization. We remind them all the time, we're 10% of you all. So whatever happens in California is going to dictate the world. You know? So we also, the median income in California is $64,600 for school counselors currently. We're about 10,000 more than the rest of the country. And there is looking at a very positive trend in school counseling with about they're projecting in the next 5 to 10 years about 37,000 more jobs throughout the nation for school counseling. So they're seeing more and more of a need and more of an infrastructure of how school counselors fit into the school system at large. So we're just under 10,000 school counselors, and this is to compare our colleagues, psychologists, social workers, and nurses in our school system. And we've made progress in the last 5 years, and let me show you. 28% increase in our workforce in California in 5 years. Would you like your bank account to increase by 28%? I would. So that's significant to have 1/4 more in our workforce. And so think about that. So what was what was going on 5 years ago? Any idea? I know Mike knows. But we had some bills being passed that CAST was very much behind. One of them had to do with Darrell Steinberg. He was the Senate Pro Tem, and he was the first one that came out with, we need multiple measures in our schools in regards to their effectiveness. So at the time, we measured, what did we measure our success with before in the our standardized test score, so did our most challenged kids, were they good test takers? No. Was it an accurate measurement? We said no. And so with that, we see the local control accountability plan, right? And we see that we have school climate, we have college and career readiness, some of the things coming out in the dashboard. But we were the only organization that stood with Darrell Steinberg to get that passed. And actually the backstory, because Darrell was looking at dropout prevention. So I was up in Sacramento quite a bit with him because he would do panels talking to dropouts, and he would always lean in and ask a student who was speaking to the panel, what happened with your school counselor? And a lot of times what would happen is either they didn't have a school counselor or the school counselor was so busy because their caseloads were so high. And Darrell went to Governor Brown, and he was actually terming out, and he says, if anything, if you can give me one thing to sign, I would like you to sign this before I leave office. And he did, and here we are with multiple measures, and I believe that is one of the key factors on why we have more school counselors working in California schools. So let's look at it a little deeper. So let me see, do we have a little pointer here? I don't know. So I don't think there's a pointer on this one, but let me just this is 30 years of school counseling in California. So let me pull this off. So as you can see, starting in 1990, we were about 800 to 1. And then starting in 92, that was a recession, by the way. We went up to over 1,001. We got the dubious distinction at the national level. Oh my God, when I'd go to national conferences, people would say, what's going on in California? We were absolutely in last place. We had the largest caseloads in the nation. We no longer have that, but we did at that time. And so you'll see for many years, we were dealing with just kind of the status quo. And about 99, there were some significant things that happened in 99, and that was Columbine. And it became, Gary Davis actually called our office, his staff did, and we flew up there to talk to him about violence in our schools. Who would have known this is where we progressed over the time. But at that time, we were able to get some legislation passed, which became a categorical program in order to fund school counselors. It was called 1113, AB 1113. So that began we lowered it somewhat. It wasn't a lot of money, but it was, it was like 100 million. So, but it wasn't a lot for a big state like California. Just to put us in perspective, because I just got back from Canada last week, is that we have more people in California than the whole country of Canada. So when you try to manage a state that is as large as us, $100 million might seem like a lot, but it really isn't. So then you'll see that in 07, 08, look at the drop. Does anyone know what happened in '06 to cause such a big drop in '07, '08? Some of you might even be those people. Marty's sitting there. What is it, Marty?
1802.
Absolutely, AB 1802 happened. And with that, we worked with Schwarzenegger's office in order to get that passed. And we dropped in regards to school counselors for a number of years. Then, what happened in about '09? The recession. And look at how we jumped back up. And then, as you can see, we have gone steadily down to a place that we have not been since before Prop 13. We're now 682 to 1. That's large still, but and that's including elementary, middle, and high school altogether. But we are in the right direction, right? We're getting closer and closer to the medium and then to the ideal. And we think that we're going to continue to increase our workforce because we become more significant, more relevant to what our schools are aspiring to get to and what they're being measured on. So talking about silos, we've just actually blew up some of those silos that we were working in before that time. So, and what we're trying to do, CASC is trying to do, is to make our school counseling program recession-proof. And how can we do that? How can we, with the next recession, it's going to happen, right? How are we going to make sure that we are working in the schools and that we're not just laid off right and left? And so I will talk a little bit about some of those things. So one of the things that we've done is we do our state leadership, and we're at the table of many functions. Like tomorrow I'm flying up to Sacramento to be on a mental health committee that's at the State Department. We are in the committees having to do with college and career readiness. We're in committees having to do with college boards and some of those folks that we're with. So I can't even tell you how many committees that we serve on or we are speaking to in regards to those in leadership. So it's not just legislators. You know, our mission is just real simple: to promote excellence in the school counseling profession. And we look at it through member services, whether it's professional development, communication, other kinds of things that we do for our members and for the school counselors at large, professional development, and our advocacy. So in California, we're now the largest state association in the nation. We started in 2000. I was the president at the time, and we were in another organization that was not willing to move forward with lobbying efforts. And so there was a grassroots effort of individuals throughout the state that we all put in $1,000 to start the organization. And now we're now the largest in the nation. So we're looked at as a national model for how we run a business for school counseling and what we're doing in regards to making a difference in our state. We are also the only organization, state-level organization, with an office and a training center that we have in Ontario, and with 3 full-time staff members. So there's only one other state that has one executive director like myself, and the rest are part-time people. And so some of the services we have includes a lot of communication out there. So some of you are on those kind of communications, so we keep those up and going. We also have networking opportunities. Has any of you been into any of the networking opportunities? Okay. So we do that throughout the state. We also celebrate our excellence in the field, and so Jeff is going to be honored in Washington, D.C. in January, so end of January, 1st of February for School Counselor of the Year. Those things are very important. We became significant using this model of Counselor of the Year with Michelle Obama. So I've been to the White House twice now, which was wonderful. So now we're not at the White House, we're meeting though still in Washington, D.C. But we're still, we anticipate Michelle Obama will come to this, so she's coming. She tries to come every year. And that was a lot of work to get us to having Michelle Obama really understand school counseling and be supportive of what we're doing. So we do professional development. We look at trainers of trainers programs to basic types of training needs that we have. And these are things that are coming up in 2019. So we're doing academies, like in February we'll be doing a solution-focused climate specialist academy. So the individuals that go through those trainings will be certified in solution-focused climate strategies. The idea is that they'll be able to come back and train teachers and other staff members on strategic conversations that they can have with kids in order to create a more engaged climate for schools. So that's one of the things coming up, but we also do restorative practices and undocumented youth and some of the more hot topics in regards to our profession. So the advocacy is probably my area, that I'm just so passionate about and love doing, and I want to talk a little bit about this and how we've driven policy over the course of time, because it's been it's been an exciting time of people coming to us actually now to ask what they can, how they can help support our profession instead of us asking them. And we've done quite a bit of investment. So we have a lobbying firm. This is our lobbyist, Leangela Reed, that works for us every day in the Capitol. Her sister happens to be a school counselor. So this is the Capitol Advisors, one of the more renowned lobbying firms in Sacramento. And as you see, one of the people up there is Jack O'Connell, so I call him a friend, and he used to be the state superintendent of public instruction. And they're working on behalf of us, all of them together. But Leangela, that's her prime target of what we do. And these are some of the things. I'm going to spend just a minute on this slide because I want to talk about what we look at that I think is important. One is the development of fiscal and policy development at the state level, and what we can do to make sure that we're an integral part of schools, and that the funding does support what we're doing. And one of the ways we did that this year is there's money that's still being teased out. Thurman carried the bill, but it was having to do with the new tax on the sale of marijuana. And so there's a big chunk of money there that everyone, for mental health, for students, and we're looking at how can we, as a part of the California system, capture that. So in Colorado, they had something very similar, so we're looking at that model, and they actually have not been able to hire all the counseling openings. They don't have enough people in the state. We're looking at other states to fill that. So we're thinking that this could be a real big opportunity for us if we can capture some funding for our schools in regards to mental health services. We want to make sure in the state budget and any policy proposal that the actions do not impede our programs, so that we do not take away from what we're already doing. So a lot of times you have to come and say, well, we stand against the legislation, or we have some concerns. So there's right now there's a policy going through having to do with health, and it's the health standards. And in the health standards, what we have brought to the table is the fact that there wasn't a lot on mental health. And so we wanted to make sure in the health standards that we're including mental health services. And then we want to make sure that people understand the challenges we face, So, and we absolutely understand that having high caseloads is difficult, right? So it's very difficult. You all have good intentions to try to meet every student's needs, but working with 500, 400 kids is still high. It's still hard. And so we continue to bring that up to legislators about that. We also make sure we're integrated into this program like I spoke about, and then we draw awareness to the connections and unintended consequences of different state legislation. So we just had one that was very interesting, and it was out of Elk Grove, an assemblyman, and he wanted to use gun tax to pay for school counseling at the middle school level. And so that's the way the bill was presented. And the first thing I said to the CAS board is I said, okay, so here's the complication with this, is that we have to get behind it. If it does go through, it didn't go through, it got hung up in taxation, but if it does go through, we know what happened when AB 1802 came around. We have ABH counselors. We do not want to have gun counselors, as the phrase out there. It was really, so I said we were trying to spin everything and get prepared and then help support this legislator in his pursuit of what he was trying to do and work with him, so we had really solid legislative language about what we're trying to get to, because he wanted more mental health services and such. So anyway, that may come back around and we'll see. We monitored 60 bills last year, and these three in particular we took a position on, and we will continue with that. So we have more accountability with ABH now with pupil mental health services, and we're going to be reporting out more data to the state in regards to what's going on in our school system in regards to that. So that was one of the bigger ones that got passed last year. So there was also, just to show you, these are people that we've worked with over the course of time. And as you see, we have like Senator Ricardo Lara. He's just now become our insurance commissioner. So he sponsored legislation to change the ed code in regards to what school counselors are doing. It hadn't been updated since the 80s. And others have worked with us. Schwarzenegger worked with myself, with ABH 2. So all of these folks have worked with us in some significant way over the last 20 years. And recently, Ed Hernandez, I believe he's not going to make the lieutenant governor, but he's also sponsored legislation for us. We also have Jose Mendoza, who's worked very hard for school counselors. He just won his re-election. Senator Lara, as I said, and then Assemblyman Tony Thurman. He spoke at our conference. I'll tell you a little story about Tony. So he's now, I think I have it here. Let me see. Let me hold off on Tony. So these are the things that we're going to be working with, and so is Tony going to win the election? I just want to talk a little bit about that. We brought him in as a legislator of the year for our conference in October. And did anyone go to the conference? Okay, great. So behind the scene, we have all this going on in front of the scene, and behind the scene and behind the big screen at lunch, we bring key people together that we can influence. And at the table was not only Tony and Jose, Assemblymember Mendoza, but also Jack O'Connell was there. And we had this table set for about 10 people. And I sat next to Tony before he went on stage. And I said to him, he said, "I'm sorry, my office is so difficult to work with," he said, which is pretty typical. You're trying to get someone that's right for the election. I said, "I didn't think anything about that, but I want you to know, Tony, that the reason why you are here is because it's for you." He used to be a social worker. He is championing school counseling issues, school social worker issues in our schools, especially foster care. I said, "So you have 1,300 people out there to talk to about some of your ideas, and we think that's good." And also CTA was supporting him. So at the end of his speech, he says, "What's your cell phone, and let me call you so we can share contact." And I thought, well, that's great, boy, I'm getting in. He goes, "I really want your help if I get in to help design an office for school counseling. We don't have a student support services office for social workers and psychologists. We don't have any support at the state level." So I said, that would be great. So as I told you, I went to Canada last week, and I was flying up and down to Sacramento after the conference and doing some work, and I got a text message from someone I had feeding my dog and was going to water for me. He says, "I'm sorry, I can't do it." It's like 2 days before I had to leave. And I thought, oh my God, what am I going to do? So the person that I usually use, his name happens to be Tony. I thought, well, it's like 9 o'clock at night. Let me go ahead and just text him and ask him. 4 days before the election, I get a text message back, "Where do you live?" And I'm going, well, Tony knows, and I looked, and of course, Tony Thurman. And I wrote embarrassing, you know, so I'm so embarrassed I can get red. And I thought, oh my God, he'll never forget me, right? You know, and I said, no, we have to get you to win, right? You know, I mean, that's where we're at. You don't need to feed my dog and have to live in Richmond, and I, you know. And he wrote back at the end, he goes, I would have. And I thought, wow, that's interesting. You know, I think he would have, you know, he lived close. So, nice guy. We are still out, we don't know, but he is about 75,000 votes in the lead. And that's according to EdSource last night. And we're hoping that, you know, at least the school counseling profession is hoping that he does win. We're hoping that, of course, I'm going to text him and remind him to make sure that I'm there and others are there to help in designing some of the work at the CDE. And we're very excited about this opportunity to do this because it's going to be a really hard movement to get CDE to really bring in structures that's really going to help support the work that we do. So, as you can imagine, it's been hard because the Department of Education, you have people that are dedicated full time to like doing professional development for school counselors and stuff like that. We in California have had to be dependent on CASC to do all of that, instead of with other states where they have a combination of efforts that are going on to really support some of our areas of interest. So this is one of the reasons I was up in Sacramento 2 weeks ago was Assemblymember Cunningham, who won his seat, asked if they could do something for school counselors this year. So this is more common than not. You know, out of the blue, we get this, either my lobbyist or myself gets an email from someone that wants to know. And so we're working on designing some legislation for the next season, and that will continue. We're also significant through the partners that we have and the ones that believe in our significance and wants to help us. So one of the things that are the most interesting that's happened is the ACLU has just put out a report that has to do with the number of discipline referrals, suspensions on school campuses, and then they have disaggregated that data based on ethnicity, special ed, and the number of counselors, social workers, psychologists, and police officers on school campuses. So they're correlating, they're looking at the correlation between not having support services and increased discipline referrals, or the equity of discipline referrals by ethnicity. So they are very interested in what they can do to support us in the next legislative season. I think it's pretty exciting in regards to what they're doing, and they really see us as significant, and they can't believe how high our caseloads are. Even when we say the recommended is 250 to 1, they go, oh, that sounds impossible, you know. So they're going to help, and sometimes it's really nice to have partners, because I met with the executive director about 2 weeks ago, and I said, you know, you can introduce legislation that we can't, you know, things that we will have to respond to, and let's work together. And so they're looking at ways we can do that. Here's another one that's going forward with UCLA, and they're looking at MTSS in regards to school counseling, and how we work with level 1, level 2, level 3 students, and that would be in academic, college and career, and in personal social areas. And they have funding through Orange County Office of Education of Butte County, through the governor's office, and multiple $1 million, and we're working on bringing in some researchers to really look at that and work in partnership with this organization to look at how we work in each of those levels. We are in the biggest research firm in the nation is the American Institute for Research. They happen to be in the Bay Area, and we've been working with them on some research having to do with solution focus. Some other reports, white papers, things that we can bring and show what you're doing so we can show your significance, because you're making a difference in students' lives. Instead of talking about what you all do, is what you've done to make a difference in certain areas. And that's more easily accessible now because we have the dashboard. And so we look at the things that the dashboard is actually measuring. Attendance is one big factor. And I know you all work on some of that kind of issue, also our college readiness, our FAFSA completion rates, things like that. The National Education Association, NEA, had 3 provisions that were passed in July, but all had to do with school counseling, all had to do with advancing school counseling, making sure there's funding for school counseling. So at a national level, we've been able to infiltrate in that area and make a difference. And some of our CAS board members have been board members of NEA at the national level, and they have been working diligently at that level. And they've also been working at the state level. And we didn't have, 25 years ago, we didn't have any kind of area where support services fit. So they opened up a standing committee for student support services back in 2001, and they monitor legislation. They actually get support from CTA for us, which is really wonderful because they are the ones that can really move agendas, right? Is CTA, they're the ones that gets in the door of the governor's office and stuff because they're so big. Biggest union in the nation. We've also been working on new standards for school counseling at the training standards with the Commission on Teacher Credentialing. That work, which I was a part of, is finishing up, and we should have those passed in 2019, and implementation of a new training component. Probably the significant difference is we're going to see more mental health training for folks going through the school, because we absolutely realize that there is a greater need than it was when we did these standards 20 years ago. So what's next? We have National School Counselor Week in February, and we'll have a state proclamation, and we'll be celebrated at the Capitol in regards to that. We have 2 state conferences, one in Northern California. That's going to be during that week. And then we also have a Southern California conference that's going to be also in Riverside again. So those 2 things are things that are coming up. It's going to be a busy legislative season for all of us. I anticipate I believe it's 1/3 of the people sitting in new seats, legislators, assembly members, and Senate. So we have a lot of education to do, because a lot of times they come in and they might have an idea what an administrator does and a teacher does, but they don't necessarily know what school counselors do. So we spend time educating them, supporting them, and helping them understand our issues. So that'll be the first part of the year, and then other legislative endeavors. So I'm going to open it up to questions, thoughts, and anything that you can give me to help me in doing the work for you all. So, or ahas from the presentation. Any ahas? Someone. This is always that awkward pause where I look, and then I have people not looking. So, but it does help to hear from you. So, any surprises? Yeah.
Loretta, because we do have counselors who have been decades of experience, maybe a few years experience, could you share your insights on how school counseling has changed? Maybe some things that stayed the same in lieutenants and counseling, just kind of a personal insight of changes or what's continuity.
Sure. How many of you been at this more than 20 years? Okay. And some of you out here can actually tell me too what the differences are. But what we're seeing in regards to our helicopter view of it is more mental health issues. I think the dilemma for school counselors is to not become an urgent care center, where it's like next. You try to get something done, trying to organize in a way that's going to be what we call intentional guidance to do some of the work and some of the strategic planning to just responding to the urgent needs. The state, they recognize the increase in suicide prevention, suicides, and then the need for suicide prevention, training for all staff members. I think the unknown for us is the social media issues and the depression that comes from social media. So there's been a very big emphasis of mental health making sure our kids can make it in the world in regards to that. And we really look towards the school counselors in particular, because there's so much more of us than anyone else that's out there doing that work. We're the ones that see it every day. The other piece is always the balance between college and career career technical education, career pathways, and how that always wanes and flows with whoever's in office. You know, all of a sudden we see a lot of CTE kinds of things, and then we go to the college and career. So that on a national basis, the college and career is still being paid attention to by Michelle Obama. I've been a part of the Reach Higher campaign, which is 5 representatives from the state of California that's worked with Michelle Obama. So I did my work, my dissertation was looking at the relevance of school counselors within major change in education. I was very curious of what happens with Common Core during that time and where school counselors fit, and are they brought into the fold in regards to that. And as I was doing that and making my case that they're really not, Trish Hatch calls me and she says, "Are you almost done with that dissertation?" And I said, "I'm within like probably 4 weeks of finishing." She goes, "You need to hurry because something's happening at the national level." And I go, "What's happening at the national level?" And I said, "I gotta know." She goes, "Michelle Obama." And that was before she spoke at our national conference in Florida in 2014. And of course I hurried up and I actually added her in. She's the most promising hope we have had for our profession, because they understand the significance of what we do in regards to college and career readiness and just how complex some of that issues are in regards to getting students to transition from high school to post-secondary options. So those are some of the things that are going to continue in regards to that. No longer are we like the ones that schedule kids into class, right? That was what we had for battle, because that was our perception. That was the Huntington Beach perception, is that we schedule kids in class, and of course anyone can schedule kids into class. So why do we need a professional? Well, we know now, and the state knows that we've got to get people that have a broad range of understanding. It's not just, I mean, think about it. We're like the general practitioners. We have to know a lot about a lot of things. We have to know about not only the academics, but how do we get, you know, I mean, it's amazing what we have to know in order to, and we make it look so easy. All right? Yes.
So the answer to this question would be lower immigration, but knowing that we have challenges with that, do you have any recommendations to those of us who work in the district office on how we can support counselors specifically at a district level?
Sure.
Feedback?
Right. Absolutely. So, and that's why Jake is here. I don't see Jake. There he is. So, in fact, when Victor called me, I said, "You need to bring Jake out because he really has some ideas on how to really structure and create goals." So, it's changing. What we were doing as a profession is looking at data more than looking at what we do. And there's each school, what I've noticed is that each school is a bit different on how they organize in order to get the work done. Because it does take some real thought that goes into how you organize to look at data and actually strategically plan the work you do in order to make an impact in those areas. And noticing what's different. So let me give you an example, because I was student support services director, and we would look at the California Healthy Kids Survey every year, and I put out the data, and I was noticing that my high school counselors had decided to do an alcohol and tobacco kind of training in the classrooms for juniors. And I pulled out the California Healthy Kids Survey, and I said, you know, we can see from this that the kids really start using substances somewhere between 7th grade and 9th grade. And so let's target our efforts. Let's go down to the middle school effort, and let's do it that way. So it's looking at data strategically. One school district in particular, I thought they did a great model, and if you have followed that lead, that was Arcadia Unified School District, because they did 2 meetings a week for school counselors, and people are going, what is that? How do you do 2 meetings? One was like a nuts and bolts, because the nuts and bolts meeting has to do with just the functionality. But the second meeting had to do with like a learning community meeting. It had to do with looking at the data and planning and being strategic about that. And so that meeting was always on a Friday afternoon, and sometimes it got canceled, but at least it was on the books. At least it was something that they were looking at, just like our English department teachers do, or our math department teachers. So it was using that kind of department philosophy and data-driven school counseling programs that moved them forward to addressing some of their most urgent needs.
I had a question. One of the slides you said that more access for high school kids to counselors. I'm a junior high school counselor, and my question is, I kind of think we have it backwards. What we're seeing coming from the elementary schools is kids don't have any coping skills. Not only are the mental health issues increasing, but the complexity of those issues are phenomenal. And the elementary schools, I'm glad to see there's something there, but we really need to put some energy in the elementary districts with counselors and psychologists and social workers, where the foundation can be established, so our high school folks can focus on the career, technology, and being a great citizen, and all that kind of stuff, and all those college prep things.
So,
We're caught in the middle.
yeah, and that was a quote from a legislator who wrote an email to me. So, and that's what they were asking for. So what we do is when we go in with a legislator that says whatever they say, you know, they have an idea, right? Then we start helping them develop that idea in a way that is related to research. It's amazing what bills get passed, and it's never really, they don't look at the research to know the effectiveness of certain things. So we have to educate them, and so that was why I flew up to talk directly to the legislator who was proposing this, to really look at why high school and how do we expand that information. So I agree with you, and the research supports that too, and so it's still the legislator's bill. So we have to work on the front end before it is introduced, which is in January, is when all bills get kind of put into the coffer, and then we start looking at them and move them through for the 2019. So absolutely, and actually at one point I was working with Schwarzenegger, sitting at a table like this. We had school counselors on the phone. It was a conference call, and he was talking about what he wanted to do with WSHUHSD. And at some point he says, I don't think that we really need elementary counselors. And I had a napkin, and I wrote on the back of the napkin what he needed to say in regards to elementary counselors. However, our priority might be, so he kind of reworded to say AB2 was 7th through 12th grade. We tried to push him to a K-12 with AB2, and we weren't successful. So it's a dance, you know, that we do.
So I guess my next question is, you had mentioned not being urgent care.
Right.
That's exactly what we feel that we're doing.
Right.
Our suicide rate, for example, we had 12 athletes. Me personally, the three of us, as a very intern, has done 22 suicide assessments, and we've had 3 additional students who are hospitalized with their private therapists in 12 and a half weeks. 3 years ago, we had maybe 5 or 6 a year.
I know.
Incredible.
Well, and I know. The best I can say is I know, because I hear it everywhere. And even when I was leaving, working in Los Angeles County, Student Support Services would come to the table, you know, quarterly. And I thought it was just Monrovia where I worked that was really struggling. We were having suicides and stuff, and I realized that everyone was not, it felt like a deer in the headlights. We didn't know what was happening, but we knew that we had tremendous issues having to do with mental health, and that school counselors were being sucked into having to do that over other kinds of work. And so looking at models, and perhaps, I mean, these are the stories that we ask for. So if you're, as a member, we'll ask for, see your hand. We ask for you to give us information. So sometimes we'll send out and say, what are you doing in regards to mental health? We had a survey that went out, and then from there, Jake and I have been working with Carolyn Lopez on a white paper on mental health, because we need to come in with some papers that show what's happening, and what's the issues, and what's happening that is working out there, and what are the needs. And so mental health is absolutely bubbled up to the top, and we have to do 2 white papers, and one of the discussions we had was, which one do we do, college and career, or do we do mental health? And we all decided that mental health was the most prevailing issue that we're facing as a profession, and that we needed to focus in on that. Right. Yeah. Well, right. And we're trying to get legislators to understand that you cannot put a Band-Aid on an arterial wound. That there's real needs for concern, and they're hearing that, but they're trying to find simple solutions to a very complex issue. That we're at the table having those kinds of discussions. Tomorrow, I'm going to be at a mental health committee meeting, all-day meeting, with representatives from all the professions out there and the community at large, talking about these kinds of issues. So it's important for me to see and hear, because I can take those messages straight forward to the to people that make decisions for us. Fine.
I just wanted to share something that you may or may not have heard about, something that we're exploring in our district with regard to some pilot wellness centers, different on other sides of the valley. This is not the solution. We feel a little bit like you do, like a deer in the headlights. Is, you know, we kind of opened this discussion and there's an explosion of need. But in case you hear about it, we visited recently down in Burbank. They have these wellness centers, which, if I could in short explain, they are a place that's not school. It's a place for kids to go where there's no bureaucracy, there's no lines to wait for kids to be able to say, I'm in crisis, I need help right now. And they have it set up with, they have outside groups that come, that are there to actually work with students. And we're trying to figure out how we might begin something like that here in our district. We talked about West Ranch and Canyon being a place that we would start to pilot those. We're trying to figure out how that might work. But in case you're hearing about it, we wanted you to know that we're trying to find ways that we can partner with you, knowing that your plates are full and overflowing, and this it seems to be an area that we need to make a priority. So more on that later, but if you hear anything about that, yeah, that's just the level of piloting right now.
Right, and I see just like a wheel, you know, like the community centers or community mental health centers, school counseling types of efforts, maybe bringing in mental health services that are coordinated, you know, so there's, the model you're talking about is very popular in Northern California too. I've been able to see some of those sites, and I started one in Monrovia many years ago. So there's some ways, you know, I think it takes very people at the table, including school counselors at the table, seeing how we can really develop a complex response system for kids, and a prevention one too. I think there's someone over here, right here. Yeah. So, yes, in fact, I usually think I can win almost every political battle, and that one I lost. And it was so complex, and so I had brought it to the table for the panel of 12 of us, to work on how can we make, what I wanted, I wanted specializations beyond a credential in mental health. You know, maybe it's like a child welfare and attendance has like a 12-unit type of minimum. Mental health, college, and career, and so I thought if we could have some sort of a preliminary credential, then a clear credential that would specialize in some of these areas, that would be a good match. And as someone who used to hire school counselors, I would look for people that had a specialization to help lead some of those complex issues. So I lost in that one. So we're still looking at it though, and I think the next step for us is to look at ways we can push it through a legislative process. So I've already brought that up to the lobby. So anyway, so I hesitated because it's a very complex internal issue that I was trying to get to, because you know, I'm just one person trying to think of ways we can really solve this problem, because I truly believe in what led me into this profession and the advocacy of it is really the kids, not school counselors. I just felt that school counselors are the solution for all these kinds of issues that we have in our society. And so how do we do that? And so that's one of the ways. And then we're doing, so the academies is to solve that. So the solution-focused climate academy will help, instead of waiting for it to happen at a university level, why don't we take on a lead and train? And so we're gonna have, for that particular academy, we're gonna have Linda Metcalf, who's written like 12 books on solution-focused counseling, and it's a whole, from February to April type of training, so that then people can come back and be prepared to lead the way in their schools in those areas.
Time for one more question.
Okay.
I was just gonna say that the roundtable that you discussed, that we and Mike were asking what could the district do? It would be awesome if we could sit down with elementary people that feed into our sites, with our high school people, and have a discussion. I know that's a challenge because we're different districts, but what kind of strategies are they using in the elementary? What kids do we need to be aware of and target, and what things can we put in place that can flow from elementary to middle school?
And Loretta and I were having conversations about this last night. We had dinner, and first of all, we found out that we grew up about a quarter mile away from each other, which was a small world. She grew up about 2 blocks away from where my parents still live in Ontario. I could have. But I was also telling her about the challenges that we are not a unified school district and that the elementary counselors are still relatively new, and I know it's categorical funds in the different school districts, but we hope this is a spark, a beginning of articulation, K all the way up through 12, between our various school districts. So unfortunately, we do need to move on, but we want to thank Dr. Woodson greatly for coming out. So thank you very much, Loretta. And
I'm gonna leave some paperwork, happy to do, I'll be here this afternoon, but I'm gonna leave some paperwork, happy to do school counseling, just informational things about our association, so I'll leave it someplace.
thank
Thank
you.
you for allowing me to speak.
Let's go ahead and take a 10-minute break. Help yourself to coffee, snacks. The restrooms are in the back. We'll resume at 9:20 with Jake Olson.
Around and snap some pictures of, just the crowd in general. Right? Get pictures of, I'll get some other
That was something that we found. Thank you. Oh,
But my thing is like, if you've been in the field that long, and I mean, like, why do you have to go back? And yes, that's exactly what you know. And I get that part, that you can do a few of the courses, but it's different. Like that, for example, I've got my accounting, so I know that the standard for you have to have at least, I think it's like 40 to be able to transition into that function. So it's like, there you go, but it's like if you have
picture of the refreshment.
and I guess I could reach out to
I have nothing that says if you don't have the picture, it's dead in here.
Yeah, so I figured, right, it's not like, people like, will say, that's great.
They won't let you write on keys.
Okay, if you go ahead and return to your seats, and we'll begin in 30 seconds. Okay, as we move on to the second part of this morning's presentation, we have Dr. Jacob Olson, who is a professor at California State University, Long Beach. Dr. Olson will tell you a little more about himself, but he's been a school counselor for many years, I think in a variety of states, and then came to California to join the faculty of Long Beach State. I had the opportunity to see one of his presentations 2 weeks ago at the Orange County Counselor Symposium, and I know he has presented at a variety of professional conferences, including CASC and others. He'll be talking to us today about mission and vision statement and how we could create mission and vision statements for our departments, how to align them to the national standards of school counseling, and also align to our district's mission and vision statement. So kind of imagine it like a tree. The base of the tree is maybe the school or the national standards. As we branch off, we get to our district mission, vision statement standards, and the different branches might be the mission, vision statement for a curricular department, for the school psychologist, and for us, for the school counselors. So we're very excited to have Jacob here today. So I'd like to introduce Dr. Jacob Olson.
But I want to be able to move around a lot and kind of go from place to place. So if you can hear me, I'll not use this. But if it gets to where you can't for any reason, just raise your hand. Okay. In the back, you guys okay? Okay. Cool. So really quick, I want to get into the work. But like Marty mentioned, I started my school counseling career in Washington State. I started at elementary level. So I kind of hit the jackpot with my first job out of my master's program. I was in a district in a school where we got some grant funding to develop comprehensive school counseling programs aligned with the ASCA national model at the elementary level. So we were doing one house for each building. Actually, the second year, because I was the rookie, I had to split between 3 schools for 1 year. So I feel that pain. But so you're at one school, we had evidence-based curriculum school-wide. We were doing small groups. We were doing school-wide multi-tiered support. So that's kind of where I learned like a lot of this best practice stuff. But then I kind of got to where I was starting to do little trainings and meetings with my school counselor folks in the district. And a lot of them, especially the ones that have been in the field for many, many years, wanted to get some strategies about collecting data, using that to drive intervention. So we started having kind of like, not district supported, it was like, hey, all those come to my school, we'll collect data and we'll think about how we can use that data. So we started to do that work, and then I started to think of the importance of kind of talking about that stuff with more people. And so for me, that meant a district level position or maybe like go teach at a university or something. So very long story short, because there wasn't a lot of district positions in my state at the time, I wanted to go to university to teach. So that's when I went to North Carolina. But then a big thing for me was I'm not going to get up in front of people like you or my students if I haven't been a school counselor in middle school and in high school too. So if I'm coming with my elementary and I'm talking to high school folks, you can only imagine what that would be like to hear that. And I'm not about to stand up and talk about high school about it. So in North Carolina, I worked at a K-8, really unique school. K-8, about 100 kids. They had to have an IEP or a diagnosis to get into the school. And I also worked for a comprehensive high school in Charles Manford district. So becoming K-8, and I think it's really cool to see here that we have K-12 perspective. And I came up here liking you guys, and liking the Bible. When I started hearing some of the comments about K-12 alignment, about needs, you're my people. I know I'm in the right place. And so what we're going to talk about today is taking a lot of the things that you're talking about and spending time on it. And I love that, I think it was Mike that mentioned, just carving out the time to get out of our buildings and think and plan is like gold, right? Because we don't have time for that. We're grinding in our schools. We don't have time to think about what's our mission, what's our vision. So we have this time, and you have some professional development that's kind of going to be laid out for you. And so it's really cool that we have the opportunity to stop and think. And rather than rush to what kind of group can we run to help the hardest kids, or what can we do for this specific, mental health issue, which we'll get to. We have I think the luxury to start from, like Marty said, the ground up, and really be intentional and really plan and do a lot of prevention so that we have a foundation for when we do need to get to interventions with kids that we're ready for that. So that's why we're starting here. So here's what we're going to cover. I'm going to talk to you super briefly about kind of the core components of a comprehensive program. You guys know this, but I just want to kind of get us all on the same page. I know there's a lot of different folks in the room. The number 2, 3, and 4 is really the work that we're going to do, and that's what I want to get to. We're going to start with talking about our belief systems, and that's going to happen at the individual school level. And I think there's middle and feeder high schools in the same table. The idea is that you might have some of that cross grade level discussion for that. But then we're going to move into vision and mission. Okay? And we'll talk about why we're doing this in a second, but this is kind of the flow. I want to, before we leave this, I just want to mention the goal of today is to have a first draft and a first thought of this stuff. Okay? So we're not in 2 hours, we're not going to do all these things and be done and just be ready to go. This is stuff that takes time. You're going to have time on your own to think more about it, but this is like a first draft, like a lunch. Okay. This thing's in the back, so I think it's a little bit of a delay. Okay, so when we talk about a comprehensive school counseling program, I want to talk about the rationale for that. Okay, and some of you mentioned it. I don't know about you, but my anxiety gets really, really high if I think about going into a school as a school counselor and not having a plan or a framework, and I just have to like go out and put out fires. Like when I did that my first year, my anxiety was through the roof, right? I don't operate like that. Some of you do maybe, but for me, I needed that plan, and that's why we want to have a comprehensive program, okay? And some of that is going from just doing those responsive services and putting out fires for some students, or doing just a bunch of activities kind of randomly, to having a program that we can really say is touching on those academic things, the career stuff, and also the social emotional stuff. Okay, so going from activities and responding to program and prevention. Okay, another rationale. That's gonna go like 50 slides. Okay, there we go. So this is something that I know in our district, the districts I've worked in, and also a lot of districts I go to, there's a lot of everybody kind of doing their own thing. And that could even be within the same building. Ideally, obviously, our team is cohesive and we're working towards the same goals. But I've been into large high schools with several counselors and other folks that there's different ideas about what school counselors should do, and there's different ideas about what they should be doing on a daily basis. So you can imagine how messy that gets. Another thing is, within a district, like we have here, we can build some cohesion so that we're all going towards the same goal. And you can imagine if you have that same vision and that same direction, folks in middle school are knowing what the goals and what elementary folks are doing, and then the folks at the high school know what the middle school folks are focused on and doing. And so you can imagine with a common goal, you're all going in the same direction, okay? And then the last thing is, a program helps us define our role instead of letting other people define it for us, right? So if we're just in a building and we're just kind of going from activity to activity, in my experience, unless you have an administrator that knows exactly what school counselors do and they're super supportive, they're gonna be telling us to do all kinds of things that we shouldn't be doing, right? A lot of non-counseling stuff. And so when we have a program that's systematic and we communicate that and it's organized, especially across the district, we're more likely to be able to define, here's what we do and here's our program, okay? So this is kind of the rationale that we're gonna be working from today, I see a lot of smiles and nods. This is stuff that we know, but it's just kind of to organize, here's why we're talking about this stuff. Okay, so Marty mentioned a tree. Okay, I'm mentioning a house, it's the same thing. We're starting with beliefs, vision, and mission, because if we don't do that, you have the left side, the program can get a little wobbly and a little off track at times. Okay? When we're in week 12 and a half and we're dealing with the suicide assessments and everything else we do, we can lose track of what our purpose and our goals are, right? When we have an organized vision and mission and goals, then we have a more solid foundation, and everything we do is going to be tied back to that vision and mission. Okay, so we have that solid base that's over there on the right-hand side. Okay, so we're going to start building that strong foundation today. Okay, so raise your hand if you're familiar with the ASCA National Model, American School Counselor Association National Model. Okay, so most of us are, and in my experience, this depends on when you got your master's degree and or the PD that you've gone through, right? So if you've been doing this a long time and yet there hasn't been a lot of PD opportunities, sometimes the ASCA model is like, oh, what is that again? But a quick review is this is the national framework of best practices for school counseling. Okay, so this is the framework that if we're doing these things, we're going to comprehensively meet the needs of all of our kids. Okay, the purpose of today is not to do all this or talk about all this, but we're going to talk about the foundation. Okay, so in my district, when we started developing our programs district-wide, we started with foundations. Okay, because what happens is when you do program focus and you look at our competency and our vision and mission, that drives all this other stuff. So delivery is the things we actually do with kids. The accountability is our data collection analysis, and then management is our assessment. So everything we do in those other categories are based on what is our vision and what's our mission? Like, what do we want to do for kids? Okay, so it will really help us have that focus together. Just a quick note too, for those that haven't looked at this for a while, around the outside of this framework are the pillars of what school counselors are. And so that includes leadership, accountability, collaboration, and systemic change. Okay, so those are embedded in all we do. Okay, so we're going to start with beliefs. Okay, so I'm going to review these briefly, and then we're going to jump in and do some thinking and get some work done. Okay, for beliefs, we're really talking about our individual beliefs about students, about families, and about education. Okay? The reason that we're focusing on beliefs is that beliefs drive our behavior. Okay? So, for example, when we had this conversation at the high school level with the high school counselors across the district, some counselor brought up the notion of, well, I believe, what I'm really struggling with is my belief that parents in my school, they don't care about their students' education. Okay, so that was this person's belief, and that's their perception. And so we talked about how does that belief impact your behavior. Okay, and what we talked through, and it got a little bit messy, right? And there it got a little frustrating, and you guys are smiling, so you know what happened. So there is tense, right? Because what we were saying was, that person was saying, in my experience, parents don't care, and there's all this stuff going on at home, and they're not reaching out to us, and we try to reach out to them, they don't care, and so I'm not gonna try to do parent events, I'm not gonna try to involve them in any behavior plans, anything like that. And so we had to talk about that belief really impacts your behavior. So part of reflecting on our beliefs is not just to say, oh, like, let's just dream and have rose-colored glasses, and it's not lofty, fluffy stuff. It's thinking about how do our beliefs impact our behavior every day. And some of those beliefs can also be related to bias, right? So if we have these bias about our students, about other educators in our school, that's going to impact our behavior, and that's going to impact how we do school counseling every day. Okay, so that's why we're going to start with that reflection. I want to note that as we go through each of these sections, they're all going to be related and build on each other. Okay, so the beliefs that we reflect on and develop and document are going to directly influence the vision that we're going to talk about and create for our program and for our students. Okay? So let's do our first kind of work activity, okay, before we go on to anything else. And we're going to focus on beliefs, okay? So you have in your packet, you'll have key documents that match up to what's up here, okay? So as we're talking, you can reference those. You can also just reference up what's up here. But just so you know, when I turn you loose to your table, you'll have these documents, okay? So I'm showing you examples of beliefs first, because I can see on some of your faces, this isn't stuff that we think about every day, maybe, right? And so sometimes it's like, beliefs, I kind of get it, but what does it look like? And so the first thing that you have is some examples of beliefs, okay? So I want to just hit on a couple examples, and this will kind of help you as you're talking with your group kind of generate some ideas. A side note is, these examples, you can copy and adapt these examples if that helps you, okay? So these are the conversation starters. So example beliefs, so if I'm at this school, are you guys all want to, no? So, okay, so let's just say we're a team, wouldn't that be cool? Okay, so if we're a team and we're talking about beliefs, we're first gonna reflect individually, right? Because we all have our different beliefs, again, we come with our different lenses. Then we're gonna talk as a whole team, as a school team, okay? So for example, if we're a school team, we might say that our belief is that all students can be academically successful and productive members of society, okay? We might also say that all students have the right to participate in the school counseling program, okay? So things that kind of make sense, but also that we might not have thought about too much about. Okay, so you're really thinking about students first. What are your beliefs for students? And then also, what are your beliefs about the education process, parents, and some of those other key roles? Okay. The third example I want to point out is a belief that all students' ethnic, cultural, and racial differences and special needs are considered when we implement our school counseling program. Okay. So if that's a belief that you hold, that those things should be considered, that would be an example of that. So you have these examples, so this is just to know that's what you use it for, okay? So we'll come back to that. But the way that you're gonna think about this is having an open, honest dialogue, okay, where everybody feels like, okay, I can reflect on my belief, but I can also share my belief with the table, okay? And obviously we wanna be respectful of each other's perspectives, right? So if you're in a school team, you guys know each other, you've been in the trenches with kids, so you're respectful and open. But because beliefs kind of can get touchy in terms of my beliefs might differ from Lisa's beliefs, might be different from someone else's beliefs, we want to just create a space where, hey, let's be vulnerable for a second and be able to say what our beliefs are, even if we know it could be a little bit risky. And that's just kind of listen to each other's beliefs. Because if we do that and then we put our beliefs together as a school, that's when it gets really powerful. And that's when we feel like, okay, we're a united team, okay? So our intention is obviously we want to best serve students. So to do that, we want to have some sort of a consensus around our beliefs, okay? So that's all the background, but here's the steps we're going to take to make this happen, okay? So we have 20 minutes, okay? So I'll be the kind of the guide of the time, so don't worry about that. But the first thing you're going to do is you're going to individually brainstorm a list for yourself of your own beliefs about student success. So students are first, but those other topics there are things that you also want to consider. Okay? So first do that individually. Okay? When you kind of have seen around at your table that people have kind of taken some time and they've documented some beliefs, then you're going to share it with the small group, okay? So in this room, the idea is that only the folks at your table can hear your individual beliefs when you're sharing them, okay? If it gets too loud, then it's gonna be hard for everybody to hear within their group. So that's about the volume level you want. You don't want people over here hearing your beliefs. We don't want stealing ideas on this. We wanna just keep it in the school. Just kidding, we wanna share. The next thing, the last thing before we launch is, as a school, really quick you guys, as a school, you want to build some consensus and look for themes of the individual beliefs of, together, what are our beliefs as a school counseling team? Okay, so that the last thing is you want to build consensus, and you want to summarize those beliefs. Okay? Marty is going to pass out some.
Line sticky, very cool.
Perfect. Okay. So we're not going to get too crazy about where and how you have to document this stuff. This is a first draft, so we have stickies. We also have plenty of paper in your packet to document this stuff. Okay. If you can hear me, can you put your hand up really quick? If you can hear me, can you put your hand up really quick? Thank you. Okay. So I'm going to start the timer for 20 minutes. So this is where you got to keep each other on task. So spend individual time first. So for the first probably 5 minutes, we shouldn't hear a lot of talking because you're thinking on your own and developing your own list. Okay. But once you kind of look around and said, you good, I have mine, then you're going to start to share out and document a list of those beliefs. Okay. Last thing before I launch you. Here's your final product, okay? These are examples of a lot of different examples. You don't have to have this many. It's not a prescriptive number. But you want to have a list of your beliefs for your team, okay? It doesn't have to have everybody's. So if I have 5, you have 5, you have 5 beliefs, it doesn't mean that we have to have 15. We've consolidated those and looked for those themes, and then as a group, where are our beliefs, and we're going to write those out. Okay? There's no magic number, but if you have too many, it might take a lot of time. So start, kind of small. Okay? So go ahead and get started. We're going to come back to talk about the next steps at about 10 o'clock, which is in 20 minutes. Okay? So I'll be walking around. Marty and Baker will be walking around.
Mia's on mine too. Right her now. Mia Kirk. Oh, well, she was on it before. Now you can see it better. So you can see it better. Look, right over the FTC for one here. Do you want me to come over?
Right, exactly.
Okay, if you can hear me, can you please stand up really quick? If you can hear me, please stand up and ask somebody. If you can hear me, can you please stand? Okay, so part, just, let's get up. I don't know about you guys, but let's stretch the lower back a little bit. So, with beliefs, so first of all, thank you for participating in the activity the way you did. Nothing gets me more excited and also inspired to go through, especially middle and high school folks, talking about beliefs and what they're passionate about. Is really cool to hear and genuinely sharing that with each other. Remember that because of our time frame, the goal is not to have perfect wording, a finalized list. It's to know kind of what the process is and get a really good head start. Some of the work for finalizing these steps is going to be done at your site, because half of your site is here today, right now. The other half is coming. So you're going to have to carve out a little time to kind of consolidate and finalize, and then you'll meet back in the spring in this environment to kind of share what you developed. So just know this is a good start, so it doesn't have to be perfect. Okay? So go ahead and sit down if you want. If you want to keep staying, that's fine. But we're going to talk about the mission, the vision next. Okay. Okay. So with the beliefs, right, and regardless of how far you got, hopefully you have a list or a start of a list for your group beliefs. Okay. So if you didn't get to the point where maybe you wanted to chew on some of the beliefs more, or make sure everybody got their beliefs written down, that's going to be your first next step within your building, is to just kind of finalize your belief statements. Okay. The next thing we're going to do is talk about vision, and just remember, we got to be sticklers with ourselves to remember that these things have to build on each other. Okay. Otherwise, there's no point of doing each one. So when we talk about the vision, this is informed by our beliefs, okay? So the vision is the ultimate outcomes that we want for our students in the future, okay? This is where I love thinking about. Think about, what do you want for your kids in 15 years from now, okay? That gets me excited about seeing a kid, which I've had happen, and those that have been doing this a long time, when you start to see kids after high school working, you run into them at a restaurant or something, or at a bar or wherever, you know, kind of some random places sometimes. But and you start talking about them, what they're doing now, how are things going, and if you hear a successful story, especially of a kid that you know you put blood, sweat, and tears into, and they're doing well, they're happy, and they have a job or a career that they're interested in, and they're able to, you know, provide for themselves or from a family, that's when it gets really exciting. So this is where we want to visualize the ideal. Because if we can visualize the ideal, then we can think about, well, how are we going to work towards that ideal? Okay? So the vision is the ultimate outcomes we want to see for our students in the future. And we can ground that in the academic, social, emotional, and career domains, okay? Because that's how we operate as school counselors. Okay? The other part about this is it should reflect your agreed upon beliefs. So the things that you were just sharing about beliefs, I should be able to say, okay, here's your beliefs. Do I see that in your vision? Is that reflected in there? Okay? The vision is going to drive and inspire our work. So it's big picture, really in the future, but it's going to kind of inspire us to get there. Okay? And ideally, we want this vision to align with our school and district. I didn't find, or we didn't find a district vision. And so what we want to do is, I looked at each of your school district's websites, just kind of quick and easy. Most, if not all of them, had a vision up on the website, okay? So as you're doing this part, I think at least one person has a smartphone or a laptop at their table. Hop on the website real quick if you don't know your school's vision, and just look at what that is. And literally, you want to align the vision you're developing with your schools, but you want to also steal, and we'll talk about this in a second, you also want to steal some of those key words and phrases that are there, okay? Really quick question, why would we want to do that? Why would we want to align our school counseling program, our building vision, with our school's vision? Why would we want to do that? What's that? Cohesiveness, okay? Let's add to that. Thank you. What else? Working towards the same goal, okay? Good. How about one more idea? We need one more idea to justify the next 20 minutes. What's one more thing? Otherwise, what's the point? Okay. Creates kind of an action plan. Okay, good. You're in our vital role to school. Okay, now we're cooking. Okay, so we got cohesiveness, it creates action, and it defines our role. Okay, I'm going to put it bluntly of how it helped me. My principal actually cared more about the school counseling program because I was saying to my principal, what I'm doing can help you carry out your vision that you have for this school. So it's not admin over here and teachers over here, school counselors over here. It's, hey, when I'm meeting with kids and I want to not do lunch duty and I want to go into a classroom to give college information, it's to get to your vision because our visions are aligned, right? So it's buy-in also, okay? So that's where the alignment comes in. So hop on your district website and look at the vision, and I'll make sure it's aligning and still those key words, okay? Before you do that though, let's look up here for a second, a couple examples, okay? Because again, vision is lofty, so we want to really make concrete examples here so we know what to do, okay? You have this in your packet also. So here's an example. Vision of the Chester Middle School Counseling Program is that all students maximize their potential for academic success as lifelong learners. Our students graduate with college or technical training equipped to meet the challenges of an ever-changing global workforce. Okay? Our students possess the necessary skills to be empathetic and compassionate towards others, as well as independent and responsible adults. And last but not least, our students become contributing members of their community, accepting of cultural diversity, and are critical thinkers as they navigate the complexities of home, career, and community. Deep breath, okay? Yours doesn't have to be, just so you know, in the end, it doesn't have to be that long or that complex or wordy. That's an example of all the things that you can encompass, and also how it's thinking very dreamy, very long-term, very idealistic, but that's what we want, okay? There's another shorter example here. You have some in your packet, okay? Make sure, if you want, go ahead and highlight and steal those examples, any words that you like, any sentences, that's what they're there for, okay? So last thing before you launch in, okay? Here's how this process is gonna go. Rather than just going from 0 to thinking of that awesome sounding paragraph, here's how you break it down, okay? So first thing is you're gonna make a list of words or phrases that describe what you hope for your students, will be 5 to 15 years in the future as a result of your work in the school counseling program, okay? So we're thinking 5 to 15 years down the road, what do you want for our students, okay? Be descriptive, confident, and optimistic, okay? What are the best possible outcomes, okay? So first you're gonna do that list, okay? The next thing, and do that individually first to get the brainstorming going, and then you can start to consolidate that list, okay? Number 2, identify keywords or phrases in your school vision mission, or your school vision statement. So pull that up real quick on your phone, or have one person do that, and just see, number 1, what is it? Because I don't know about you, but I had to look mine up. It's not something I have memorized. Pull out some key terms that you like that actually align with your school counseling program, okay? And then take all that information and just take your best effort to put down a couple sentences, maybe even 3 sentences that kind of represent your very, very first rough draft of your vision, okay? So don't get caught up in wordsmithing or having it perfect. Just go through the steps and get as far as you can, okay? So we'll come back together. I'll be walking around for help, but we'll come back at 10:30. We'll check in after the vision. So plan accordingly with the time.
Last one. This is football, by the way. I'm like, what is that in his face? Who hopped that? For a second, I thought you were trying to spell football. I don't know how to spell football. I'm like, I feel like I should. You're listening. Oh my gosh. I didn't do it at all. So frustrating. Vision statements are more like mission statements are how we're going to do what we're going to do against it. Vision. Oh well. Okay, so where's the vision statement? before, what was dangerous was
Thank you. I know it's kind of like, but if you do it, then people see it, it helps bring it down. Again, thank you for going through the steps of revision. It's so thank you so much again for going through those steps of revision. I'm getting so pumped up just going from table to table and the questions that you're asking and the things that you're writing down. It's exciting, very exciting. One thing that someone brought up is if your school doesn't have a vision, then there's nothing to align it to there, so you kind of can just do your own thing. And so that's
So we're going to talk now about the mission, but before we do that, same thing with beliefs is if you don't have like a rough draft of like a vision statement that you came up with, like a sentence or a couple sentences or whatever it is going to be, that's okay. I know you brainstormed a lot of ideas and some drafted just let's just give it a try putting it in sentences. That's okay if that's where you're at. Your colleagues from your site are going to do the same thing in the afternoon, and then when you guys come together as the whole school team, then you can start to take everyone's ideas and finalize that first draft. Okay, so you'll have more time to chew on this. Other meetings dedicated to coming back and sharing some things out. Okay, so again, where you're at now is where we should be. Okay, the next thing we're going to talk about is the mission. Okay, so let's be really picky and really strict about thinking about the similarities and differences between these two. And somebody asked that question at a table, and I thought, what a great question. Okay. So the vision, remember, is what do we want to see long term? It's very dreamy. It's very inspirational. The mission is how we're going to make that stuff happen. Okay. It describes what the school counseling program does. Okay, so it has a lot more action to it. It's not as so much here's what we want, but here's what we do. But make sure, again, have at least one person at your table that always says, okay, let's go back, guys. Does that align with our beliefs? Does it align with our vision? Okay, so always go back to that. These are not silos, even though they're in boxes. I should have had some other cool thing. I'm not that creative, but these should all go together. Okay. The mission is, this is another good point. And someone in the back, I love someone in the back brought this up of, hey, can we just have a simple, common language kind of a statement so that a kid or a parent reads that and says, oh, I get that. My answer was, heck yeah, right? It doesn't have to be this complex, wordy, beautiful thing. It can be, but make it fit for you and your program. Especially with the mission, it should be very clear and very concise about how your program is going to reach your vision. Okay, so action-oriented, very specific, very clear. Okay, the last thing is it aligns with the mission of the school and the district. Okay, so unlike the vision, guess what? Y'all have a really cool mission statement from the district. Okay, so you're going to start with the district mission. Then you're going to look up your school mission, and you're going to take your favorite words and concepts from those two, and you're going to make sure that your school counseling program mission aligns with your school mission and your district mission. Okay? So let's say that together. Okay? Your school counseling program is going to align with your school mission. Okay? And also your district mission. Let's do it one more time. Your school counseling program mission is going to align with your school mission and your district mission. Okay, thanks for doing that. I know it's kind of like, okay, we're not, middle school kids, but just to help us burn it in. Okay, make sure it aligns, because as you can see, as we talked about before, you want to show your principal, your teachers, your parents that, hey, what our school's trying to do is what we're trying to do. We're doing the same, we want to go the same direction. And the folks that, I don't know if there's any still left, but the folks that were, I think, at this table that talked about what do you guys need as school counselors, they were here and are coming back, and they're giving us this space, which is really cool. But trust me, they want to see that what you all are doing with your actions and your activities, and if you want smaller ratios, they want to see what you're going to do is going to align with what they want to have accomplished at the district level. So again, it's not just doing it to do it, but it being very strategic and intentional and saying, hey, what we're going to do is going to help our school, and you better believe it's going to help our district meet their goals. Because then these folks are going to say, oh, you guys are aligning, you're interested, how can we support you since you're going towards our vision as well, or our mission as well. Okay, so alignment is important, but doing it authentically. Okay, so let's either on your paper or up here, let's read this together, since it's really important we capture some of these key things. These are the Jake Olson, what I thought was kind of interesting to pull out. You can have other words or terms, or you can use some of these, okay? So the vision, or excuse me, mission is we prepare students to meet the challenges of the future as lifelong learners and responsible citizens. Okay? In partnership with families and community, we create meaningful and diverse learning opportunities for all students. I would really, really urge you to think about all students, right? And if that's not something you've thought of, it probably is, but make sure that you're thinking about all students, okay? Because if we want a program, not just individual things, we want all students, okay? So they can develop the knowledge, skills, and character necessary to succeed. Okay, I bet you're thinking, oh, I can think of some knowledge, skills, and character that the school counseling wants to address. Okay. In all of our work, we demand fairness, honor, quality, and expect achievement at the person's highest level of ability. Okay. So take keywords or concepts that align with your mission. Also look at your schools, pull that up on your phone or your pad or whatever you have, okay? And we're gonna do a very similar process, okay? I'm gonna skip over this, you have it, but this is an example. Actually, do you guys have this in there? Can you put a hand up, thumbs up if you have it? Okay, thank you, you have this. So this is an example of, I'm not gonna read it all, but this is an example of an alignment. And this is between a school's mission statement, so not a district, but this is the school, the high school, and this is the school counseling mission. So they were very, let's just say, efficient, and they basically took the beginning part and just said, that's also our mission. And then they're like, let's spice it up a little bit and add some stuff about data-driven and about some other stuff, okay? Again, don't feel like you have to have the length that you're seeing. Make it fit for you and your program, okay? So use this as an example of aligning the missions, okay? The process is gonna be similar to what we did with the vision, okay? So either in your packet, or please look up here, you're gonna make a list of words and phrases that describe the most important work your school counseling program can provide. Okay? Words and phrases about your most important work that you can provide. Make it action-oriented, okay? Use language that defines the best possible school counseling program you can deliver. So let's say you're like, man, I wish I got to go in the classroom and talk about career and college knowledge type stuff, or different job pathways. But you don't have it built into your program, right? You don't get it into classrooms. That's okay. Add that in, because you want this to be what you want to have happen, and then we'll figure out how to make that happen, okay? The second thing after you make that list is you're gonna identify important words and phrases from the district and the school, okay? So we just talked about examples of that. A couple things to think about, any reference to important roles such as leadership, and I've heard the word advocacy about 25 times today, which is fantastic. Make sure that's reflected in your mission, if that's what you're wanting to emphasize, okay? I also, again, highly recommend you consider notions like all students and things like equity and access for all students, okay? And then the last thing you'll do is you'll combine and edit all that information and just give it a go. Try to write out a couple sentences of a mission statement, okay? Again, use the things in your packet as examples. Pull out sentences you like, just copy them, adapt them, pull out words that you like, okay? So I'll be walking around again. If you have a question or you want clarification, please just hand up and I'll come back, okay? So we got 20 minutes for this part. Remember, we're on the mission, okay? So we're gonna come back at 11 o'clock from this part, okay?
And as you're writing these up, because we only have half of the members of each school site here, make sure you have one note taker who's taking the draft of what you're doing now and bring it back to your site and either type it up and or keep it in a safe place. So after the other half of your teams come this afternoon, then they can bring theirs back, and then you could work later on to synthesize these. We're thinking of in the joint high school, junior high counselor meeting that's coming up second semester. And Victor and I will give you more information later, but working together between now and then to synthesize what your teams are working on now and your afternoon teams will work on, to synthesize them into one cohesive mission and vision statement. Still a rough draft one, but one for your department and for your school.
Okay, 10 minutes, I'll check in 10 minutes.
Show them
So, again, thank you for going through the mission, and whatever you have in terms of a list, or if you took a stab at doing a rough draft of a couple sentences, as Marty mentioned, make sure that all the things that you've used to document your ideas, make sure that you hold on to those. If there's one point person that's organized or good at keeping papers, that could be a point person, whatever it takes. Because as we know, and I do trainings and presentations, but we love to have meetings at the college level, right? And I know K-12 or college or whatever, when you meet and you leave, a lot of times you just move on and you start doing your day-to-day stuff. And you forget about everything that you did, right? So we have a better chance of making this work actually mean something if we keep all the stuff from today. Okay, because you're going to be given the time to come back to it and revisit it and build on it. And so if we don't have these fresh, or at least we know where they are, it's going to be harder to keep that momentum going. Okay, so make sure you keep track of that. A couple things just to wrap up here. There's going to be a spring meeting, and this stuff is going to be communicated out, elaborated on by Marty and Victor. But the idea is that we take this, you take it back to your site. Your colleagues are going to come to the afternoon version of this exact same thing. You're going to have to carve out at least a little bit of time at the building level to have our conversation about your experience this morning and their experience this afternoon, okay? I know you're busy, and I know there may not be time built in for that kind of meeting, or you probably have meeting time carved out, but you have stuff going on. But find a time to have that conversation, because when you come back in the spring together, it's gonna be really powerful, and you're gonna have a good, strong foundation if you can come back and say, okay, we talked and shared ideas, we have a list of beliefs, we have a rough draft, first draft of our vision, rough draft, first draft of our mission. So if all of you come back with that, that's gonna be fantastic in the spring, okay? Because what I wanna share with you, so that's what this is right here, okay? So each building should have one list of beliefs, one draft of a vision, and one draft of a mission by the spring meeting that's designated to come back to this stuff, okay? Where this is going, okay, and some details need to be fleshed out and that kind of thing, but I want you to know what the point of this is the next steps after that draft has been, somewhat finalized, is communicating those and reporting those out, okay? And so I'll be talking and working with Victor and Marty of how to, have that conversation and share some resources in terms of who do you let know what your vision and mission is? Where do you put that? Okay, communicating that out. But that's a very important thing, because if we do this and then it sits on our desk, what good is it, right? I mean, if we're aligning everything we do with it, that's half the battle, but we want this to be part of the program. We want the school to know, we want the teachers to know, we want our parents to know, we want our folks at the district to know, we want everybody to know, right? Again, it's that, so everyone has the common language, and so everyone knows what we're doing, right? Anyway, so next steps on this is, once we have a vision and a mission, that drives everything we do, right? So the next step is collecting some data about your school and what's going on in your school in terms of, we call them like the big three, right? So attendance, academic achievement data, and behavioral type data, okay? I could talk all day about other types of data, right? Needs assessments, surveys, social emotional stuff, but the point is, the next step is gathering data to paint a picture of what's going on in your building, and then setting some really specific goals based on that data, okay? So that's, I think Loretta responded to Mike with something like, one thing you do to make it a program is you use data to drive what you do. That's the next step. The cool thing is you get all this data and you say, here's our goals. Goals are aligned to meet the mission and the vision, right? So, I mean, think about this, end of next year, you have this vision and mission, you set some goals, and you're gonna start to think about, how are we gonna do this stuff, right? By the end of it, you're gonna have done some things, collected some data, and you can look back and say, and here's how we're meeting our vision and mission, which aligns with our school and our district. Okay, that's when it starts feeling like program, preventative, systematic things, and not just putting out fires all day. Okay, so that's where this is going. So trust me, it'll be worth it, and you'll feel like you have a clear vision to do the work day by day because of the work you've done today. Okay, the last couple points. Just want to make sure I heard a couple things I wanted to clarify. So keeping the documents from today, make sure you give that to the point person or keep it yourself. I talked about carving out time, at least for one conversation at your building, so you can combine your draft with the other half's draft. Okay? And then, I already talked about that. And then I'll talk to Marty and Victor about reporting this out once the drafts are kind of like finalized. Okay? Any burning questions that came up for me or for the whole group? Okay, so Marty and Victor are the point people for questions, follow-up, that kind of thing. I'm happy to answer any emails and stuff like that. But for sustainability, use Victor or Marty as the point person first. Again, I'll call you on the phone, I'll text you, I'll email you, but I'm not going to be in your district as a personnel person. So I want you to build systems that are sustainable. So go to them first, and then I'll help them get info, or if you need me directly, then we can talk, okay? I just want to thank you guys too, and very, very, I hope this comes out genuinely that you guys are an awesome group of people. Usually there's at least a team or a person in this kind of thing where they're just like, I can see the eye roll, or I can see like this is great, but what's going on Facebook? And I didn't see any of that, right? Everybody that I looked at was contributing and like really was trying to figure out some important stuff. And that's really cool to see. I think it's pretty rare when we get together as a district. So I just want to commend you on that and thank you just for letting me be a part of that this morning. I hope it was helpful. But I encourage you, when you leave, that you keep some of this momentum going, because I know once you get back to that site, it's like back in the grind, right? But I look forward to hopefully talking with you again and just kind of keep up what you're doing, okay? So thank you.
Thank you very much, Jake, and thanks for coming to the Heart District. We really appreciate it. So Victor and I are going to type up the next steps, the action plan, so to speak, from here. But just to recap, make sure you have one person who's keeping the notes from today. And then this afternoon, the other half of your departments will come for our joint high school, junior high counselor meeting in March. What we'd like to do is have a few point people come to those meetings so that you can bring what you worked on today, kind of the rough drafts, and synthesize them into a more of a final rough draft. From March, you'll have the final rough drafts, and then the assignment from then will be to finalize your final drafts in preparation for next fall when Jake comes back, and then we start working on the action plan, so to speak, looking at the program data and the goals, but really working on fine-tuning these to have the final draft prepared for next fall. Victor, would you like to say a few words too?
Yeah, I'm appreciative of all the different conversations that took place. Your energy was phenomenal. We appreciate the collaboration and invite you to keep coming back and participating in the same way. I'm excited about this opportunity. I'm excited to help drive with all of you us in a direction that we don't necessarily know we're going in sometimes, and we're going to figure that out together. So we're aligning ourselves with what Loretta said at the local, regional, national levels, and hopefully our district can stand out as one of those model districts who's doing the right things for school counselors. So thank you to all of you.
And one more round of applause for Jake. Thank you for coming down. Yes, okay. In preparation for the afternoon session, the little sticky lines, would you mind putting the unused ones kind of in one place and just kind of cleaning off the trash and organizing the tables for the afternoon session? And otherwise, we're ending right on time. So I wish you all a great afternoon and a very happy Thanksgiving next week.